And then it says that also horses and donkeys with swords on their backs are an easy prey for scavenging birds. I don't think you're very familiar with this metaphor because you probably don't have lots of experience of riding a horse. Sometimes the horse would get sores or certain cuts on top of their back, maybe because of the saddle's not properly placed, or maybe they're wounded from the saddle because of the heavy burden or so. Then it would create some wounds. And then once the horse or yak has a wound on their back, then the crows or magpies would attack them. Especially they would stand on top of the back of yak or horse and start pecking on them. So yaks really are terrified of that. But if they don't have any wounds or sores on their back, they are in fact not fearful at all. They're quite very much at ease. So similarly, it applies to donkeys and horses. And then it says that people who are prone to fear, similarly, are easy victims to negative spirits, but not those whose character is stable and strong. In the old selection of Apandana Sutra, it says that once 5 people travel together and halfway through they encountered some hailing and blowing, and it was very difficult for them to continue with their journey. And then at that night they stayed at an old monastery that is rather very much sketchy. And in that monastery, there's a vicious spirit living there. And I think there is also a statue made of wood, a statue of that vicious spirit. At first, four out of the 5, they were not afraid of that spirit or that wooden statue at all. But one of them is very much scared of the vicious spirit. And then the spirit was ready to harm that particular one who's afraid of him. But then that person saw the other 4 people were not afraid at all and felt that, why should I feel scared? They're not scared at all. And then he started getting quite confident in himself as well. And then at that time, the vicious spirit doesn't have any opportunity to attack them at all. I think at the end, they also burned down the statue, and the spirit didn't harm them either. I think it's really interesting because some atheists, compared to some atheists, there were some believers who thought that who believed that many of the holy mountains should not be exploited or destroyed. But the atheists, because they don't believe in karma, they would exploit and destroy as much as they want. I think sometimes they don't really get harmed by the spirits of the mountains and so on, maybe because they're not afraid at all. In the Gagnaganaja Paripracha Sutra, it says that if there's doubt in your mind, then your mind would be disturbed, and because it is disturbed, then the Mara or evil spirits would have opportunities to attack you. Similarly, in our idiom, or in our saying, folk saying, there's a common recognition that whatever you're afraid the most, you will eventually have to face it. I think this is really the manifestation of mind. If your mind disturbs because of doubts and fear, the Maras would very much appreciate it because it gives them opportunity. According to Bodhisattvacharyavatara, it says that if a snake lies dead on the ground, crows will act like brave eagles and attack it. In the same way, if my self-confidence is weak, even the slightest adversity will be able to harm me. In fact, the crows who tend to fear live snakes would attack the dead snakes. So for some practitioners, if you lack confidence, if you don't have inner strength, for this kind of people, even a little bit of adversity will completely destroy you. Just as the crows, in fact, they are not quite brave to begin with. They're not heroes at all, but they become heroes after encountering the dead snake. Just like a great eagle or great Garuda. In this way, if our mind is rather fragile, whatever affliction and suffering and obstacles occur, then we're also just like the dead snake. Whatever little obstacles appears in front of you, they will destroy you and completely take over you, just like great Garuda. Therefore, we have to be very brave inside of in our own practice. Ponsuk Rinpoche is very heroic. His heroism is not about holding up a gun and start attacking his enemies. It's not like that. He holds the gun of wisdom and completely defeat the enemies of obstacles on the path of practice. Therefore, we really should have the sense of confidence. Do not constantly think that, oh, poor me, I'm so unfortunate, this is just so very difficult, my whole life is not successful. If you were to give yourself such kind of negative feedbacks, in fact, they are not so great. This is the pith instruction. I think today I'll give some extra teachings. Please do not look at the time or signaling the time. There's nothing to watch for. You're not rushing to catch a plane or anything. So it says that for the confident and brave ones, even the Maras cannot harm them. Thus, it is that the wise see that all happiness and suffering depend upon the mind, will seek their happiness and well-being within the mind. In fact, this is quite important. The wise and the fool have very different ways of looking at happiness and suffering. The wise ones, the ones who have genuine wisdom and who have genuine practice, what they'll discover is that whatever happiness or suffering, in fact, is all depending on our mind, our perception. If they were to search for happiness, they would search for it on their own mind. The basis of suffering and happiness is their own mind. If you were to search for happiness, you have to find it on your own mind. Since all the causes of happiness are entirely within themselves, they will not be dependent on anything external. Your own mind is just like a great treasure trove. Whatever happiness you want to gain from relationship, from wealth, or from other aspects such as social status or anything else, you will be able to have it. And you have it already. So this kind of happiness at the very bottom of it is really a sense of contentment. This is quite important. Because once you have contentment, you'll be very happy. If you're not content, whatever you have, then it is very difficult to have happiness at all, because happiness is really a content mind. In the Buddhist logic or Abhidharma teachings, it talks about how happiness is really a perception. There are many different kinds of perceptions. So happiness is a perception of mind conscious, and there is a happiness that comes from physical perception. In terms of psychology, when we talk about the 5 roots, in psychology, they would talk about the 5 roots that we have and talk about them in terms of senses, the sense of seeing, the sense of touching and smelling and so forth. But in the Buddhist logic aspect, we'll talk about eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness. There's really those are the ones that does not distinguish. So we have to really understand that all of the distinguishing part comes from mind. And in terms of the sense of touching itself, or the touching consciousness itself is non-distinguished, or it doesn't really make any differentiations. But the happiness or not comes from that sense of touch, really comes from our dualistic mind. So happy or not, in fact, it all depends on your own dualistic mind. The dualistic mind is a sense of grasping based on your habit. Once we recognize that, we will be able to generate a sense of contentment, and then you will be able to gain happiness naturally. Without a sense of contentment, happiness is far away from you. In the Sutra on the Buddhist bequeathed teaching, it said that the contented ones, even lying on ground, they would feel at ease and are very happy. But for the ones who are not content, even if they are in heaven realm, they would not consider that is sufficient for them. So for the ones who are content, even if they're poor, they're in fact quite rich. Even if the ones who are rich but without a mind of contentment, they're still poor. I really like that part. In the sutras, it gives a lot of teachings, such kind of essential teachings. In Buddhism, we talk quite a bit about being content and eliminate our desire. It is not only limited in terms of our wealth or money. In fact, it applies to all of our desires. In terms of our relationship, if you were to think that, oh, I've got enough already, this is pretty good, with such kind of contentment, whomsoever you build a relationship with, you will have a sense of contentment. But if you don't get content, then whomsoever you're with, you will feel lots of suffering. Just like some celebrities, they would change different partners very often, very quickly, because you would feel that the other person cannot bring you whatever you want. Similarly, it applies to the world. It also applies to everyone's relationship, or it applies to the sense of searching or chasing after fame and social status. If you are a deputy chief, you probably want to become the director and then eventually a mayor and so on. But this is really because of your sense of lack of contentment.
前面我们刚开始的这个文章的开始呢也讲了嘛，有情和这个无情的话呢，因为你很自主的，你很单一的人呢，就是他们也不会对你有任何的损害。
Also, then it says that since all causes of happiness are entirely within themselves, they will not be dependent on anything external, which means that nothing whatsoever, but be it sentient beings or anything else, can do them any harm. And even when they die, this attitude will follow, so that they will always be free in control. There are people who would feel that even at time of death they would be happy. There are people, in fact, that they feel that they're okay with anything, just like some of our volunteers. They would say, okay, I can do this post. Oh, you don't want me to do it anymore? That's okay, I don't have to do it. You want me to go there? Sure, I'll do that. You want me to volunteer in this post? Okay, I'll do that. There are people who are very flexible in such a way, and they would feel quite content in either in whatever situations. They feel at ease if they get ill. They would think that, okay, I'll chant mantra, and then they would feel that they can die at any time. They would feel that in fact they are quite happy however, and whomsoever treat them in whatever way. Their mind is quite flexible and very open, and in such a way I think at any time they can attain happiness.